Morning, everyone. So today's webinar is really a bit of a general update on what we've been doing with regards to cloud. So before I start, if we just do a little bit of housekeeping, we've got an hour session booked. A lot of the content I've got is probably 40 minutes. There's plenty of time for questions. So if you come up with any questions, please ask questions in the panel, in the Zoom. And I'll sort of cover off questions at the end. Feel free to chat with colleagues and peers, and we're recording it, so you will get a copy of this session sent to you together with a copy of the slides as well. For those of you who don't know who I am and we've not spoken before, my name is Mark and I look after the compliance products at Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting UK. So I look after the product management team that look after the tax products, the accounts products and the audit products. So I've worked in tax technology for 17 years. Prior to that, I was in practice for 6 years, and for my sins, I also worked for HMRC for 9 years as well. So in terms of an agenda, I'm going to give you a bit of a quick update on cloud software, and specifically stop and talk a bit about where we are with accounts production and personal tax. And I've got a recorded demo of where the product is today, is showing how you would prepare a set of accounts and complete a tax return. I'm then going to talk a bit about client onboarding, and this is you onboarding your clients and some of the pain points that you've spoken to us about. I also want to cover off topics from Accountex. So obviously last month was Accountex. There was a few of us from the product management team at Accountex delivering sessions covering various topics. So I just sort of want to cover off a bit, sort of the headlines of what we talked about, and tell you how you can catch up with that content as well. Then making tax digital, it keeps getting pushed back, but it's not going away completely. So I want to give you a bit of a quick update on MTD and where we are and what's happening. And then really next steps. So today's topic is this broad umbrella of cloud software, and it's not just going to be a one-off webinar and then we go away and we don't speak for a while. I want to talk about next steps and how you can get involved and what's going to happen going forward. So to start with, let's have a bit of an update on the cloud. So if I cover off, and I've covered this off, the last time I ran one of these webinars was the end of last year. So this is just sort of a refresher on our cloud strategy. So when we are moving products to the cloud, we have to be mindful and what's driving us to the cloud and why are we doing it. And one of the things that we're mindful of is today our on-premise integrated suite is very rich functionality, but equally each individual product is best of breed. We've got accountants who just use personal tax or corporate tax or accounts, and equally we've got accountants who take the full integrated suite. So we need to make sure as we migrate our products to the cloud that we satisfy everyone's need and make sure we remain best of breed. One of the main advantages of going to the cloud is something called APIs. APIs is just a mechanism that allow software products to talk to each other. I'm not going to go into too much depth about the technicalities of it all, but one of the advantages of being in the cloud is that if you just take, for example, our personal tax product and you want your accounting data is stored elsewhere, APIs allow us to seamlessly share that data and integrate that data. So we are mindful as part of our cloud strategy of making sure we are what we would call API first. So anything you can do within our product directly, equally an API needs to allow you to do that type of functionality by other means. So it could be that you've got all your contact data in a CRM product and you need to create a client in our software rather than typing it in. An API approach would allow your CRM product to create that client in our product. So it's this API first approach to allow integration and innovation. It's part of automation as well, is having this ability to control software remotely. Being part of Wolters Kluwer, being a global company, we're not starting with, let's say, a blank piece of paper when we think about what products we need in the cloud. We've already got various products around the globe that are in the cloud already. So we've got this advantage of being able to decide which products we can reuse and are suitable for the UK market rather than us having to start from scratch. So it gives us that advantage of being able to get to market quicker and get you into the cloud if you want to go into the cloud quicker. For me, this fourth one is the most important element of any cloud strategy, and this is the one that probably is most important to you. If there's no benefit to going to cloud, then what's the point of going to cloud, to be blunt? Why are we going to, why are we writing cloud products, and why are you moving to the cloud if we're not mindful and central to everything we do is making your life better in some way? So whether it's saving you time, whether it's with cloud being able to increase your productivity or accuracy, or with cloud we'll be able to do a lot more analytics over your data, or automate just your mundane jobs to be done that you do every day. If there's steps that we can do to alleviate that, then great. And that, as I say, has got to be central to any approach to cloud, is how to make you more efficient. And finally, and this is connected back to that first point of best of breed, today we've got this fully integrated suite. You don't have to rekey data. Everything is shared and central. We need to keep that experience that you've got today as we move to the cloud. And part of that is this journey to the cloud is if part of your data in the short term is going to stay in your current product, but part maybe is going to be in the cloud, what does that experience look like and feel like? And how is that as seamless as it can be? So we can talk about that later as well. So, bit of a recap. When we last spoke, our cloud priorities were very much focused on making tax digital. Our immediate focus was being able to do quarterly submissions, and we're at the stage where we were betaing our software with a couple of our accountants, our customers. We were just looking and just at the stage where we were going to do our first pilot submission. Whilst we were doing MTD, we're also doing a bit of work on self-assessment in the cloud and a few bits and pieces in the background as well. So that's what our focus was when we last spoke, although, as I'm sure you're well aware, back in December of last year, MTD was deferred from 2024 to 2026/2027. It depends on the client, depends on when mandation now is. And I'll delve a bit more into MTD later on, but what this does mean is that we've gone from a previous cloud approach and we've had to revisit and make sure we're focused on where we should be focused. So for now, we've sort of decelerated our work on MTD and worked and focused more on areas that are going to benefit you quicker. So we're now at the stage where we've got a SA100 product, which is not complete. So, don't feel that next week you're going to get a cloud product to replace CCH personal tax. You're not. But it's got about 90% coverage in terms of that tax return series, the SA100. Later this year, we'll be running a beta. And equally alongside that beta, we've been working on accounts production and specifically focused to support the SA100s. We've been focused on the sole trader formats. So I'm going to show this to you in a minute. But the concept is, if you think about your jobs to be done, servicing a sole trader client, you do the accounts, you do the tax. We're trying to get that journey into the cloud when you want it to be in the cloud. Another pain point, which I'm going to talk a bit more about later on, is client onboarding. When we sit down and talk to our customers, onboarding new clients seems to be a bit of a pain, and specifically AML checks. So again, that's an area we've been looking at, and I'll cover off what we've been doing in that area. And then signing of documents. This is different to what you've got today in your CCH central suite, as it were. But this is, if we've got a tax return in the cloud and we've got a set of accounts in the cloud, part of that journey will be to get those documents signed. The next focus beyond where we are today is finishing off the SA100s, starting to look at partnerships, and then building out that accounts production formats. So again, partnerships to support the partnership tax return, and then move on to the corporate formats, FRS 105, 102, etc. And really, as I've mentioned, MTD is not going away. The pilot may be pretty much paused at the moment, but it will be coming back, and it will be coming back sooner than you think. So we need to be mindful of making sure we can support you in that pilot as and when you want to join the pilot, if you want to join the pilot. And then further down the road, we've got MTD mandation, obviously, in 2026 and 2027. And also then we want to be in a position where we finish partnerships, corporate tax, and obviously CGT, and trust tax isn't mentioned there. Trust tax will be into our later bucket as well. So you can see our immediate focus is getting this, let's call it a lightweight SA100 product that can support the end-to-end flow for a sole trader. We're going to then finish off the SA100 and work on partnerships and corporates. and then build out the accounts production functionality to support that as well. In amongst all this, and I've touched on this already, is if you've got huge amounts of quality data today on your on-premise in CCH Central, and if in the future you want to use our cloud products, there is a whole process of how do we synchronize that data and how do we migrate that data if you want to move wholeheartedly into the cloud. So I'll come on and talk about that in a moment. We'll come back and discuss what our plans are in this area in a moment. For now, though, I'd like to run through a recorded demo of where we are with sole trader accounts and tax returns. The reason why it's recorded is at the moment they are two products. We've got the accounts product and we've got the sole trader. Sorry, we've got the accounts product and we've got the tax return product. Today, the data isn't shared between them, but in a month's time, it will be. So that's the work we're doing at the moment, is that connecting the two products together. So for now, I've got a recording and I'll talk you through as we go through. This is what the accounts product looks like. So you can see I'm on the general tab. So this is just sort of over in the setup area. This is where you would set your periods, trade name, that type of thing. Additional information. So this is for your disclosures, your letter of engagement, and then some theming as well. You can control some of the themes and what messages you want. We have a look in the trial balance. I mean, I'll be honest and say a trial balance is pretty much a trial balance, let's be honest. But so here is the trial balance you've got here. There's certain options you can do to make changes. You can search across it, obviously, by code or by description. And you can click on it and go and see the actual the journal in there. We have a look in journals. So you can write journals, you can create your journals and draft them and then finalize them. And then this is all connected, obviously, to the chart of accounts, which is where your trial balance data flows through. So if we look again at rents, you've got your codes, also your stock, and you can search by code again there. You can add codes, add new accounts, and also I'm on the all, but you've got your profit and loss and your balance sheet codes there as well. So if we look at disclosures, this I guess is where the main power of an accounts product comes in. So this is our sole trader format. So there's all the predefined disclosures, and you can see that some of them are orange, so are optional, and you can edit these disclosures. And if you make any edits, you can then reset them to your default as well. So that's already there. So you can reset your master template. You can search through. So if I wanted to look at revenue recognition, for example, I can just type and find it. And I can see my disclosure, and obviously any element of data we've already got for your disclosure, we pre-format and pre-complete for you. Any red item is an item where I've actually over disclosed, so I can filter down and just look at my over disclosures and make a decision on whether or not I need to revisit them. And now I can also just show items that have been customized and items which are outstanding and require input. The financial statements, so I've imported my trial balance, I've done my disclosures. So here's the output, my financial statements. So again, because it's sole trader, there'll be a simple profit and loss and a balance sheet, and there's my declaration. And from here at the moment, what I can do with that is I can download it as a PDF or print it. Longer term, obviously, I will also be able to take this data and share it with a customer directly, and get it signed as well. So he's, getting a document signed is something that we're working on. This is the area where the data is collated for tax. At the moment, I can export it into Excel. As I say, in a month's time, I'll be able to effectively click a button here and push that straight into the tax product. So here I am now in my main landing page, and I'm going to search for the client. And when I open the client, you'll see there's two products associated with the client. One is the tax and one is the accounts. We've looked at the accounts, so we'll go into the tax filing. So I'm now in the tax product. Only source of income this client's got is the self-employment. So I can go and edit or view that, and you can see it's pre-populated with the address and the etc. etc. I'll keep scrolling down. You'll see there is the accounting data. So today that's been imported from Excel, but as I say, in a month's time that will actually be shared directly from the accounts product. I can finalize each section to control who can edit it, or I can finalize the entire lot. And for the purposes of this demo, that's the only data I'm going to enter for now. So I can have a quick look at the calculation. And I can generate the IR mark. So I can now view the tax return. Okay, so again, this is a PDF that I can download, print, or will be able to share with the customer and get it e-signed. So that's just a copy of the tax return as a PDF, external of the software. And now that I've done everything I need to do, I can click the tax return. If we make the assumption the client has signed it, I can submit that to HMRC. And then on this screen, you can see here, this is the submission log, where you see the history for the client on what submissions have been made and the status of those submissions. So that's a very quick demo of where we are today with our sole trader accounts through to the tax return. In terms of tax return coverage, I had this on an earlier slide. We've got about 90% coverage. So if you think SA 100, SA 101, 102, 103, 105, and our estimate on coverage is based on statistics that HMRC share in terms of what forms they receive across all tax returns. So as you can tell, we've got quite good coverage already, and we'll be focusing and working on getting that improved over the coming months. So a big issue, I'm guessing, particularly for an existing customer of ours who's got all their clients in our CCH Central or our on-premise products, is the cloud sounds great, but how do I get there? What's migration look like? So this is a whole project from our perspective in its own right. So alongside that product delivery roadmap that I shared a moment ago, we are already thinking about how do we migrate the data and how do we migrate our customers. So the stage we're at the moment is we're doing an internal audit across all of our customers to work out what products they've got, what products they interact with, how many customers they've got themselves, and see whether we can sort of segment our customer base and then identify who would be a good group of customers to say, hey, do you want to try the cloud software, and let's look into how we can migrate some of your clients across. If there's any blockers in that process at this early stage, and this obviously at this stage, we're not doing anything yet, we're merely starting to formulate the plan of how we can do this. Once we've got these customer groupings, then really it's analysing them into segments, and I've got their pricing impact. That's not in any way to suggest that cloud's going to be more than on-premise or less than on-premise software, but what we certainly don't want is it to be completely different. From your perspective, the pricing needs to be comparable. So we need to make sure that as we migrate people, the pricing that we migrate from and to is realistic. And also, no one is going to be in a position, we're certainly not going to be in a position where we can migrate every single one of our customers all at the same time. So we need to identify how we're going to phase this migration approach. Then we get to the stage where we're actually planning how we put these migration, let's call them propositions, together, of defining what migration means to our customers and how we're going to deliver it. And then is the time when we start involving our customers a little bit more, and we're going to publish tools. So, you know, a lot of the migrations may well be self-serve in some way. Like, let's suggest multi-selecting a group of clients and clicking and saying, I want to migrate these clients. But equally, some of the migrations we will do on your behalf, where we migrate the database as and when you're ready. So really, it's coming up with this program of how we're going to implement migration, how we're going to onboard and test with customers, and validating that our approach is the correct way. So that's sort of the beta program. An important part of any beta and testing is to leave time in your project to iterate on that feedback. There's no point doing the testing and the betaing if you don't acknowledge that you won't get perfection first time. Nobody expects perfection first time, and we need to iterate on that and make sure we improve it before we do the final migration phase, which is effectively making migration available to whoever wants to migrate, within reason, obviously. But, you know, whoever is in a position where they want to migrate, we're in a position to support you. So that's a project that's running alongside the actual product delivery of tax and accounts and practice. Is how do we migrate our customers and their clients across to the cloud? I mentioned earlier client onboarding. So this is you onboarding new clients. And when we've spoken to some of our customers, it seems there's a general theme around pain points. When we ask the question, is onboarding customers painful? And if so, where is the pain? And equally, where are there gaps in our integrated suite that you feel we could improve? You know, both regardless of how we ask that same very similar question, is AML checks is a pain. And equally, letter of engagement / disengagement is also a pain. So those are two areas that we've sort of been focused on, is how can we make AML checks, being as that's usually, most people seem to do AML checks annually, how can we make that as reduce the pain of that process for you as much as we can? So in terms of client onboarding, again, we've got some great ideas in this area. Where we're focused at the moment is the anti-money laundering, and very much this first release you can see here, which is getting data out of CCH Central. So name, date of birth, official document ID, so passport number, and pushing that towards an AML provider and getting a validated AML check back to confirm that that person is who they say they are. And that product will be, that initial release there will be available in a very limited release later this year. So if you are interested in doing AML checks, then that's something you can get involved with. If not later this year, then certainly early next year. And you can see even under AML, we've got further releases planned. So just as an example, that biometric know your client checks, that is almost self-serve AML for your client. So effectively, you share with the AML provider their name and their mobile number. They get text a link, and they effectively self-serve themselves. They take an image of their passport, they take an image on their mobile device of their face, and then the AML check is done live, effectively like that. So it's quite a seamless way that an AML check can be done. And then after that, obviously, we're going to, after the beta and the launch, we're going to have this feedback. So there'll be further iterations, same as I mentioned for the data migration. Always iterate on what you release. And then, you know, other ideas we've got coming up is that ongoing monitoring. So if you're doing annual AML checks, is there a way that we can alleviate some of that pain, making sure that AML checks are done timely, making sure we can monitor those AML checks that are overdue, etc. Beyond AML checks, the next area we're going to be looking at is letters of engagement and proposals. So we're at very early stages of this, and really we're doing what is called discovery, and that's going out and asking questions on what the requirements are, where's the pain, how can we help you. And part of the discussion there is also, you know, is there a partnership we can form with somebody who already does this, and we can integrate with them to make your life easier. And then finally, the next area we'll be looking at for client onboarding is in the future is we know that 64/8 is a pain, but equally we know that HMRC are in the process of redesigning certain elements of their agent authorization process. So what can we do here once those APIs are fully available? How can we integrate that into either Central or our cloud suite so that we can make the authorizing your client at HMRC as painless as possible? And finally, in this area, professional clearance. A lot of accountants say that professional clearance is a bit of a pain and an admin burden from both sides, whether you have to give professional clearance to a new accountant or whether you're requesting it from the previous accountant. There's an admin burden that maybe we can alleviate for you. So that's where we are with client onboarding. Very early stages, but as I say, AML, we will be starting our beta later this year. AccountX. So back in May, there was AccountX. If you didn't go, I think I'm right in saying it was their largest event to date, something like approximately 9,000 accountants over the few days. And whilst we were there, Wolters Kluwer, we had 4 of our product team were there doing sessions on various topics. So Natasha, who is the product director, she was running a session with one of our users, Paul Freeman, who is from DJH Mitten Clark, and they were talking about automation. And this was some of the practical steps of implementing it and planning it and things like that you need to think about. Automation sounds like a scary subject to a lot of people, and Paul was talking about some of the pitfalls that they encountered and overcame. Dorcas, who is our product manager for personal tax, she had a discussion with a partner of ours who are called FD Intelligence, and they are working on automating certain aspects of the personal tax workflow. So what they're doing at the moment is, if you imagine a client emails a PDF of, let's say, a stockbroker report to you, their robot, their AI, can look at that PDF, work out what client it relates to, work out what data it relates to, and then get that data ready for you to review. And then once you've reviewed it and you're content with it, it will then do the data entry side of things as well. So that again is something that's going to be betaing later this year and into next year. So that's Dorcas was talking to them about what they were doing around digitization of workflow. Ben, who is one of our product managers around practice tools, so a lot of the AML stuff I've just covered off, that's sort of Ben's domain, but he also looks after FinSit, which is our advisory product. So he did a session on the new aspects of cash flow forecasting that's now been included in FinSit. And then finally, I was talking about my favorite topic, which is MTD, and specifically with the deferral of MTD by 2 years, what should firms focus on in those 2 years? And I touched on things like internal process improvement and whether or not there was opportunities with MTD for additional services to clients. And part of that process is how you would approach process improvement or new services. And I touched on things like lean process as a way of working rather than the traditional method. Even if you didn't go to AccountX, we have a podcast, which is the Practice Evolution podcast, and all of these sessions were recorded. And I don't think they're all available yet, but each week one will be released. So if you go to your favorite podcast provider and search for Practice Evolution podcast, then you can catch up on these sessions. So making tax digital. So this is part of what I talked about at AccountX, but equally I'm just, to bring you up to speed on what's happening with MTD. So I've referred to it as the benefits or implications, because I know that saying there's benefits to MTD can cause a little bit of friction with some people because you don't necessarily view it as beneficial. But what MTD will give us, as and when it comes in, I know it keeps getting deferred, but it is going to come in at some point, is it's going to give more frequent engagement with customers. And equally, as an accountant, you will get access to better, more recent, better quality data, whether that's from HMRC, from the record keeping, but part of that reviewing process each quarter, you can sort of, you've got access to more data to potentially provide more advice to customers. The flip side of that, the negative, and certainly not a benefit, is you've only got this 1 month submission window for the quarterly submission. So when I was talking at an AccountX, it was around There's opportunities with the first two to have new services to potentially improve your relationship with customers, but equally you should always be mindful of the internal processes, and being efficient is a must-have in terms of that reduced submission window. So that was sort of where I was focusing with my Accountex talk. It's worth delving into the impact actually of the deferral, because most people focus on the fact that 2 years is the timeline, but also the scope of it is massively reduced. So as at April 2024, when it was due to be mandated, then give or take, it was about 3.7 million sole traders and landlords who had a turnover over £10,000 were expected to be mandated, subject to digital exclusion, etc., but approximately 3.7 million, which is the vast majority of sole traders and landlords. So the vast majority potentially of your customers. Now that they've changed the deferral to, changed the mandation to 2026 and 2027. In 2026, the turnover limit is set to 50,000. That is only going to bring in about 750,000 sole traders and landlords. And in 2027, when that 50,000 turnover is reduced down to 30,000, that's going to bring in another 850,000. So you can see we're going from most sole traders / landlords being mandated, 3.7 million, to about 1.6 million. And what that means, before I go into what that means, don't think that those under 30,000 aren't going to come into MTD at some point. That is currently under review. Okay, so I don't think anyone's necessarily suggesting quarterly reporting will come in, but don't be too surprised if in the future, let's say annual MTD comes in for those other sole traders and landlords under 30,000. That's just my view, but that is under review at the moment. So there's still some information that we don't yet know. But what all this means is if you had, before the deferral, worked out what customers were going to be mandated in 2024 and you'd already started your discussions with them, the landscape has changed quite considerably since then. So of those who were mandated, only about 20% are going to come in 2026 and another 23% in 2027. And currently, the remaining 57% aren't mandated in any way. So that big thing that was MTD is now smaller. So there's some positive aspects to that. You're going to have fewer customers doing that quarterly submission with that tight month window. And you're going to have fewer clients to have that to transition and have that conversation about transitioning to quarterly process. And you're going to have more time as well. You've got an extra 2 or 3 years over what you were expecting. But there are some negatives to this as well. You're going to have, for different clients who today your process is exactly the same, I've got an SA 100 sole trader, you will have effectively 3 different clients. You'll have those who up until 26 are going to be SA, and then from 26 onwards will be MTD. Then you're going to have those who are going to go into MTD in 27, and then you're going to have those who today won't be going into MTD at all. So you're going to have this transitional period where you're going to have different processes running for different clients, which today are the same type of client. So that's going to cause a level of complexity that you don't have today. And whether it was popular or not, but if MTD did come in 2024 and it came in for everyone over 10,000, most of your customers would have transitioned at the same time. Okay, and that may have caused a lot of pain in a short period of time, but from a management perspective, you are running one type of process at any one time across all your customers. You're not going to be doing that anymore. And whilst extra time is a good thing, extra time is always a bad thing. If you're doing any sort of change management or process improvement and you're given extra time, you will use that extra time. So a longer transition isn't necessarily a good thing because you've got a longer period of disruption, which is not a good thing. So it's just something to be mindful of with MTD, what that impact is. Yes, it's great, there's an extra bit of time, but it's going to leave us in this state where we've got extra processes running for some clients and not others. In terms of where we actually are with the pilot, the current pilot, which has been ongoing on and off since 2017, it took a bit of a pause with COVID because COVID grant payments weren't covered by the pilot, so it pretty much fizzled out during COVID times. I think it's fair to describe it as it's paused to new entrants. My understanding is if you're currently in, there's a bit of confusion. Some are articles in the press are saying it's completely cancelled, and some are saying it's still going, but just not to new entrants. So currently, we can assume that if you're not part of the pilot to date, then it's not something that concerns you immediately. And the objectives, if you speak to HMRC, the objectives at this stage is really just to continue testing MTD and test what they call journeys, which is that flow of a customer through MTD, whether it's their data or their sign up or doing a submission. They're just testing the process side of things and making sure the system works. From April next year, it will still be a private beta, and it will still be predominantly invite only, but they are going to massively ramp up the numbers. Okay, and this is now where they would start to test the volumes. And for some categories, and when I talk categories, let's say I'm talking about, if you imagine a client is a sole trader with no other income, he would be a category of customer. Once they've validated in the current pilot that works, then they will open up sign up to certain categories of customers, so they can then test that automated sign up as people sign up for the pilot. Signing up for the pilot is not necessarily going to be for everyone. It's going to be probably tricky to talk some customers into signing up, but that's part of what this process is to increase engagement. And equally, I've got here increased journey scope. So there's some exclusions from the current pilot, purely making one up. Let's say if you're sole trader with UK property and you've got foreign property and residency, then you can't take part in the pilot. And over time, those journeys, those categories of customers will be increased. So from April 24 is about increasing that scope of customer and scope of journey as well. April 25 is when it changes to what they call public beta. And this is the point where, with a few exclusions, anyone will be able to sign up for the pilot. Okay, and this is, we've tested the system, we've tested the journeys, we've started to test the volumes. This is now testing much higher volumes and also testing that resilience of their systems as well. Okay, so this is their three-phase approach to getting ready for mandation for MTD in 2026 and 2027. Okay, so that's sort of where we are with that. Other areas just to call out of note, ICAEW recently called for a review into quarterly reporting. I'm not necessarily commenting on that. It's just, if you weren't aware of that, it might be something for you to keep an eye on, see what happens there. And equally, the Public Accounts Committee, again, nothing necessarily untoward here, but they are currently doing a review of how MTD is progressing. So again, there's something there just to keep an eye on if you weren't necessarily aware. Then finally, from our perspective, even though from my roadmap I showed that MTD pilot wasn't something we were actively working on at the moment, that does not mean we're ignoring it. We continue to work with HMRC as they flesh out their pilot plans, as we flesh out our software plans. Then obviously we're working very closely with HMRC getting ready for MTD. So things are starting to come to an end in terms of what I want to talk about, but I do just want to cover off next steps. So what are we going to what's going to happen next? So firstly, I've talked about the work we're doing in the cloud. And I don't want you to think that we're working in some silo black box that you don't have any access to. So we work as collaboratively with our customers as we can. And if you want to get involved, then we have something called UX Labs. UX stands for user experience. And there's various aspects of what this team does and how you can interact with this team. It might be they're working on a small little thing and they want to validate a design or an idea with you, or it might be that they're working on a big idea and want to actually come out on site and observe what you do and discuss what your pain points are in that process. So it can be a full holistic process that they look at, or a small aspect. So in terms of how you would interact with them, it's predominantly nowadays be phone calls or team calls. We have our customers come on site to us to run through some product tests, and equally, we can come on site if it's worthy of that big process, understanding what you do in a big, a big process. So let's say client onboarding. We just want to sit down and see what you do and how you work. And really, it's just that validating our designs, validating your requirements, and just being part of that process. So there's three ways you can sign up. There's a link which you'll be able to click on when you get the slide deck, or you can scan that QR code. It does exactly the same thing. Speak to your account manager and tell them you want to get involved. Or our UX manager who's looking after this program is Natasha Montgomery. So natasha.montgomery@waltersclure.com. Drop Natasha an email and say you want to get involved. Finally, these webinars. I last ran a webinar towards the end of last year. Conscious sort of 6 months plus has gone by since this latest update. So what I would like to do going forward, not just me, but across the product team, is as we've got new information to share with you, or we need new information from you, because I think, questions on a process like this are vital. Running a webinar approximately every quarter. So what I'd like to do is run this deep dive into specific product areas. So today I've sort of covered off a bit about our introduction to accounts and our introduction to tax, but maybe we can cover off AML and onboarding in more detail. Some other practice management tools that we're looking about, compliance beyond just what I've shown today, and also that client and customer migration process, which, as I say, we need to all be mindful of it. That's just as important, if not more important, than the actual products being delivered in the cloud, is making sure we get you and you get your customers' data into the cloud as and when is right for you. So as that plan that I showed gets fleshed out, it may well be we hold one of these webinars talking specifically around what our migration plans are. And any other product areas that we come up with, or you come up with. It's always interesting when we sit down with a group of our customers and you just have an open discussion, and you come out on things that we weren't necessarily thinking about, like AML and onboarding clients is a pain. So any other product areas that I think it would be useful for us to have a discussion around. And finally, that timeline that I've shared. Events can happen, like MTD being deferred, that impact on our timeline. So of course, in this quarterly webinar, I think we should always be looking at that timeline and talking about where we are and what we're focused on. So that's the content from today. So I hope you found that useful. But what I now will do is look through the questions. So I'll run through the questions. I may not be able to answer all of the questions today, and if I can't, then when we share the recording and we share the deck, I will also share the questions and answers. So I've been asked the question, how do you keep your finger on the pulse in keeping up to date with technology and tax and compliance? It's not easy because technology is always changing. AI in particular and ChatGPT, obviously that's huge at the moment. And it is just cutting out time of your day to make sure you keep up to date on whether it's Accounting Web or whether it's anywhere else, whether it's ACCA webinars. I'm an ACCA member, so I quite often dip into their webinars and get an update on Power BI or AI generally, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's just making sure that you accept that part of your day is that learning process, rather than your entire day being servicing customers and then it being an afterthought. How will the AP and SA returns in the cloud work with DM? So DM, I'm assuming, is document management. So that's a question from one of our beta testers who tested the product back in the early days, actually. So thank you for that. So yes, document management, even though I've not mentioned it today, document management is very much on our roadmap of what we're looking at for the cloud. So there's going to be this transition period, and we need to all acknowledge there's a transition period where if you want to do your tax return and your accounts in the cloud, but the practice management isn't yet ready to support you in the cloud, we've got that synchronization that we need to manage, which we will manage. So we'll be able to push a document into certain document management solutions, or we need to wait until document management is in the cloud as well. And we are looking at the moment in document management. So I know that was slightly vague, Fozia, and apologies for not being as unvague as I can be, but the document management is obviously an important topic, and we'll make sure that we cover that properly. Another question, how will this interact with the tax bundle and publications to OneClick? So in the short term, this will sort of sit alongside it. So whereas with the tax bundles from our on-premise, and that goes into OneClick, this at the moment is slightly to one side. So what part of that practice tools and work we need to focus on is making sure we integrate these new processes into existing processes where that's appropriate, or migrating your existing processes into the new process. So if it's more appropriate for us to take data out of one click and create a new bundle that's just as good as the old bundle, but take a new bundle with our new products, then maybe that's the approach we take. So that's slightly up in the air at the moment, but it's certainly something we are focused on. Another question, you've mentioned beta is available this year. When will it be available? So in a limited regard for tax and accounts, for that personal tax products and sole trader accounts, we're looking at Q3 being able to get a small number of accounting firms using our product in a beta format. And equally with that AML, we'll be looking at betaing that around about Q3 as well. So not too far away. Let's say within the next 3 months, we should be in a position where we can start bringing people into a beta. Another question, how much will the onboarding software and AML checks cost? I can find that out for you if we know at this stage, but really we're working very much on delivery of working the product, but I will find out from Ben whether he's got pricing that he can share at this stage, and I'll put that question as part of the responses that get shared here. So someone's asked a question saying, is there a rough time frame that I've missed on the CCH cloud migration? So yes and no, and it depends, I guess, is my question, my answer rather. So going back to that plan on identifying when migration is appropriate for what customers, there is no one answer, to be blunt, on when it will be ready. So for some of our smaller customers, let's say we've got a small customer who only takes personal tax and only takes accounts production to service those sole traders, early next year we would be in a position, if they wanted to move them across purely to the cloud, if that's what they wanted to do. If we then take another accountant who uses our entire suite and needs FRS 105 and 102 formats and needs corporate tax, then the choice and decision and discussion then is, do we just want to move personal tax workflow into the cloud and leave corporate tax on premise? Or would it be better for them, and to an extent this will be their decision, would it be better for them to wait until corporate tax is there and then do, let's call it a big bang migration of moving their entire practice to the cloud? So there is no one straightforward answer to the question of when's migration going to be ready. Migration will start to be ready from next year, but for certain firms of accountants, it may not be ready for another, let's say, 3 years. You know, it really is down to a discussion at that customer level as when it's appropriate for them. Someone's asked, when we import data from our accounting software, CCH accounts always has decimal figures. Can we get rid of that by rounding up? I'll be honest and say I don't know the answer to that question, so I'll see if I can find out and answer that question as part of the answers. Able to have a copy of the recording? Absolutely. This is another question. Will the accounts production retain the same functionality when using the financial statements bit, i.e. will we be able to click on the figures and see what they are made up from, and will we still be able to amend the formats of notes like in the current CCH Central version? Will the behind the scenes formatting be the same, i.e. ways of writing the formulas, adjusting fonts, triggering the lines, or will we need to obtain new skills in order to enable to adjust? So as a headline, what we're trying to do as much as we can is to reuse our current on-premise content. So if you're used to editing content today, as much as we can, we will be using a similar process going forward. So a lot of the capabilities will be exactly the same. So when you're viewing financial statements and you click on turnover to be able to see a breakdown of what turnover is, that will be there. I don't think it's there today, but it will be. So over time, my short answer to all of your questions is absolutely. What we don't want to do as part of migrating to the cloud is remove functionality. If there's functionality you rely on today in your current products, then that functionality or very similar functionality needs to be there in the cloud. The next question is, will the CCH cloud be fully cloud product or hybrid of data in the cloud, but mainly software housed locally? So I think we need to acknowledge there will be a short-term transition when some data is on premise and some data is in the cloud. To use my example, personal tax returns we migrate to the cloud, but corporate tax returns we keep on premise, just as one example. But our cloud software that we are writing is cloud software. It is entirely cloud. There is no on-premise. In that demo I showed of generating a set of accounts and creating a tax return, there was no on-premise data in that workflow. So in the short term, yes, there may well be a bit of on-premise data until we migrate across to being fully cloud. Will we end up with two workflows, one for accounts production in cloud and one for accounts production on premise? So will we end up with, I'm going to say no. Will there be a transitional period where some of your accounts work is in the cloud and some is on premise? To an extent, if you want to take that approach, yes. So if we think about formats, if we've done accounts sole trader and partnership formats, and predominantly you've got sole traders and partnerships, you might think, great, I'm happy to do that in the cloud because I can see the benefits of doing that in the cloud. For my handful of FRS 105s I've got, I accept that I'm going to be doing that on premise for the next 12 months, let's say. Or you keep everything on premise until such time as you migrate all of your accounts work into the cloud. So potentially there is this short-term workflow that will be your decision, but there'll be this short-term workflow where some workflows are on premise and some workflows are in the cloud. Next question, will we see the accounts production / cloud audit offering? Sorry, came a bit late. So whoever asked that question, you will have seen towards the beginning there was a recording of the accounts production as it stands today. Cloud audit is something we are working on, and we're working on that globally. So we've got a global cloud audit product that we're looking into. So I've got nothing to show you on that today, but we will have. And part of this quarterly webinar is as we get closer with cloud audit and we've got more information we want to share, potentially more discussion that we want to have with you, this two-way discussion in these questions, then yes, you'll start to see more cloud audit. But yes, when you watch back on the recording, you will see some of the accounts production functionality there as well. Will cloud migration make it easier to create APIs between other software providers? Absolutely. So one of the restrictions, it's possible on premise, but one of the restrictions with on-premise software is it's on your computer, and so it's quite tricky to get data from somebody out somewhere else that's not your computer and seamlessly synchronize it. Once everyone is in the cloud, then these APIs, which is this communication channel, I always think of it as a tunnel with secure doors at each end. Product A and product B, they've both got keys for the doors and nobody else can get in that tunnel, but product A and product B can exchange data and make requests via that tunnel. So when everything's in the cloud, absolutely, that's a lot easier to achieve. Next question, we moved to CCH from Iris. Move from Iris because elements kept getting pushed back. It is a case where my general impression is cloud migration is a painful process and takes much longer than originally envisaged. Maybe better to stay on-prem. And that's part of this migration discussion is, for you as a firm of accountants, is staying on-prem the right decision for you in the short term? Or is it better to get the benefits of cloud in certain aspects of your workflow as and when it's available? Yes, migrating to cloud shouldn't be, it sounds like a simple process. Everyone says cloud software is a lot easier than on-premise, and it may well be when you get there. But this process of getting from where we are today to everything being in the cloud is going to be a long process, and it is going to take time. And that's part of why we've got this whole project kicked off around data migration, because it's just as important, if not more important, than us actually just delivering the products that you need. Next question, well, I missed it, but when will partnerships be included in the roadmap, particularly for a cloud solution so we can move away from on-prem? So in thinking about personal tax, our focus at the moment is the SA 100. We're going to beta. Then next year is about finishing SA 100 and starting SA 800. So what I would like to say is the same as this year, we've got a lightweight SA 100 product that is suitable for most, but not all. This time next year, we will have an SA800 product, which will be suitable for some customers and some of their partnerships, but not all. So it's this staged approach. So next year, potentially into the year after, you will see a lot of partnership information coming out from us. CCH working papers is integral to how we produce accounts. Can I ask if this functionality will remain as it currently is when moving to the cloud? Absolutely. I think working papers is something that needs to go beyond just accounts. I can see use cases for working papers, and working papers, let's call it out, it's a link to a document that's stored somewhere, and linking documents to products or output or process can be used way beyond just accounts production. So let's think about personal tax return and a bank interest entry, and having a working papers functionality where you can drill down into what that bank interest figure is, just as an example. So working papers alongside, so a cloud accounts today, we've focused on getting the trial balance and the formats and the output there. Working papers functionality will be there as part of that build out of additional accounts information, and also audit. It plays that role in audit as well. And as I say, I can see working papers playing a huge role in other areas of our suite as well. Oh, can I throw some light into the security of data? That's a huge topic. So data security obviously is one of the most important things that potentially people don't focus on enough. I think there is generally fear or concern that data in the cloud is not as secure as it is when it's sat in on-premise software. I would disagree. I think data security, particularly when it's hosted correctly in the cloud, is as secure as it can be. Normally, the weakest link in any data security, to be blunt, is the user and the password, and the fact the password is on a post-it note that's stuck to the screen. It's data security when it's housed in the cloud is more secure than it would be when it's located in your office. But that's a whole topic. And it might be that we have one of these webinars where we just focus and drill down into data security and deal with any questions around, I'm concerned with migrating my data to the cloud because I've heard security isn't as good. So it might be that that becomes a topic that we discuss in one of these webinars. We currently use COSEC, but the sync is one way only. Will there be two-way sync once practice management is in the cloud? So absolutely, if there's an opportunity for us to improve as part of this process, then yes. I think the way that HMRC / Companies House, the government, is going with their opening up APIs to data, certainly there's a lot more linking between corporate tax, company secretarial, accounts production, there's the whole IXBRL linking together. And so I think there's a lot more that we can do with that company secretarial in terms of managing process across a company, and that includes two-way sync with practice management. Who's the owner of a company and its directors and its address? That should be more focused on the COSEC side necessarily rather than the practice management side. So there's certainly, yes, I agree with you entirely, there's opportunities to make sure our synchronization is better. When is it planned to end the in-house central software? That is a very good question, and I meant to cover it off and I didn't. We have no plans, and I want to stress this, we have no plans to stop our current on-premise software. So I don't want people feeling that the future is entirely the cloud, and in 3 years from now, we're going to push you from central to the cloud. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to guarantee central will be around for forever, because there will come a time when the vast majority of our user base is on the cloud, and then we have to have that open discussion around, is it practical for us to maintain in two places? But there are no current or active plans for us to finish central or any of our other on-premise products as it stands. Okay, so we are going to continue to maintain those alongside working on the cloud as well. Will any local pages set up or statutory database settings within accounts currently used be transferred over? So that's part of this migration, is when we talk about, will it be migrated? So it's part of this migrating your data. It's not just about migrating your customers. Any localizations you've got And that's part of that discovery work we're doing at the moment, is we can identify, let's say, look, here we've got 100 accountants, they only use personal tax and they only use accounts production. So in theory, we could offer them cloud sooner. But then when you delve into the detail, they've done a lot of localizations that today we don't support. So it very much is part of, we need to make sure we migrate as many of your localizations and bespoke settings as we can. So it's not necessarily there today, but it's part of that migration discussion. Once MTD is mandated, will we have to switch our clients impacted by making tax digital to the cloud system? Or will it still be able to use the normal CCH personal tax system? So yes and no. I don't want you to think that it's going to be completely separate from central. You will still be able to launch. So MTD is going to be in the cloud only. So let me just say that. So if you're planning on or expecting CCH personal tax and central to be able to do a making tax digital submission, it's not going to. That is going to be in the cloud only. Okay, so just to get that out there. But that does not mean you're going to have two client lists. It does not mean half of your personal tax clients are in one place and half are in another place. It does not mean you've got two places to go to ask the question, what's my next job to be done? It's 31st of January. Is it an MTD submission I need to do today, or is it an SA submission? So it will be separate in terms of, it will be a workflow that exists in the cloud, but it will be integrated into central. So you will still have one central client list with all your clients in, and you will have one place where you will go to answer the question of what job is outstanding. So you won't have two places that you will need to go. So that's part, again, of this data migration and synchronization part that sat across my now, next, later, will be making sure we synchronize the data that needs to be synchronized. So next question, if we have CCH Central with accounts, personal tax, corporate tax, and also DM, I take it that we're probably best to wait for another year or two. And this comes down to appetite to adopt cloud, and whether you want to take the big bang approach of today's the day, we're going to move everything to the cloud, or whether we want to take the approach, and this will be, you know, your decision, not mine, but take the approach of, let's move our personal tax clients to the cloud. And then maybe, let's say 6 months from now, let's move corporate tax clients to the cloud. And by moving personal tax clients to the cloud, I would mean that accounts production workflow as well. And coming back to that synchronization point, provided you've only got one place where you need to go to manage your jobs to be done, and one place where you can go to maintain your clients and manage your clients, I think that certainly for a lot of firms, it will be suitable to move workflows up into the cloud piecemeal. But for some, I fully acknowledge you're not interested in cloud until everything is there and ready and do the big bang. So ultimately, my answer to your question is, it depends on your appetite and what you want to do. Will document management with the full history move to the cloud when it does? Yeah, so we're still going through that discussion around what is document management in the cloud. Just as an example, some of our users say, to be honest, all I want in the cloud is I want you to integrate into SharePoint, because that's what I want to use going forward. So we've got a lot of discussions to do around document management. So I can't answer your question fully today, but I will get an answer for you. What are the plans for timesheets and billing moving to the cloud version? So that's part, again, I can't give you a defined timeline today, but that's part of that practice tool discussion. So alongside document signing, alongside client onboarding, we want to get and need to get client time and billing up there, particularly if you're, you know, we're encouraging you to do personal tax work up in the cloud. You need to be able to record time as part of that as well. And it might come back to this synchronization part of, we will synchronize your personal tax time down into your bills on premise until such time as all your work is in the cloud, and then we can move you up as well. But yes, we will be moving timesheets and we will be moving billing, and I'll try and get a bit of a better description than that for you at some point. So I have run over by 5 minutes, so apologies for that. But that is all of the questions. No, one more. Slightly off topic, will there be new versions of the document management plugin now that COM add-ins have been retired? I do not know the answer to that question, and I will try and find out for you. So that's the end of the questions. So thank you for your time. And as I say, this will be, the link to the recording will be shared with you, together with a copy of the slides and also any answers to questions that I can get for you. Thank you.